Hello, Think Liberty listeners. Welcome to episode 17 of Tales from the Shire. I'm your host, AJ Olding. This week, for the first time, I don't have a guest. I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm just going to be talking about my run-ins with the park department, with the Parks Department here in New Hampshire, and then my kind of thoughts on the way that the Parks Departments are kind of handling COVID-19. And it's similar throughout the country, the way that they're handling it in different places. But I'm going to focus on New Hampshire specifically because it's so hard to dig into the way every one of these states is doing it that I think just illustrating the issues here in New Hampshire can maybe illustrate some of the issues of the way that they're doing things in the rest of the country. So, all right, I'll get into it here a little bit. So on Sunday, May 10th, that was, I guess that would have been last weekend. I decide I'm going to go to Pawtuckaway State Park. It's this park in the southeastern part of New Hampshire. And I decide there's three mountains in this park. I decide I want to hike the North Mountain today. And I go in to the park. I go to the entrance where it's easiest to get access to the Northern Mountain. I pull up to the park. There's signs that say no parking's allowed here, everything else. So I'm like, well, screw it. I already drove out to the park. I'm going to hike somewhere. So I drive all the way back around to the main entrance. The main entrance is on the southern portion of the park along a road called Mountain Road. And I see the parking lot is absolutely packed. On my way in, there's two workers who stopped me and asked me if I've already paid a fee for the day and reserved my spot. And I'm very confused by this because, there's a pandemic going on, and I find that there's one parking lot closed on one side of the park, and the only parking lot that I can go to is the main parking lot that most people use. And now this parking lot is more packed than it would usually be. So we're tighter and tighter together. And the decision of the park has been such that the spread of COVID has become more likely because we are at less of an ability to social distance from one another. I end up hiking now because I'm at the main, because of the way that the trails work out of the main entrance. You start by walking down a road for about half a mile before you even get to the trailhead. And then there's a few different ways you can go, but the most popular site in the park is the Southern Mountain. There's an observation tower on the Southern Mountain. And that's really the most popular site in the park to hike to. And so if we're all starting from the exact same parking lot, then we're all going to be taking the exact same trail. So now instead of, however many hundreds of thousands of people are hiking around this park all at one time, taking different routes up to different points, everyone is now encouraged to hike to one spot, one path. And I came to later find out, as I was driving around the park at the end of the day, that they had also closed the park on the northern entrance. So if you were to look at a map, and I'll try to post a map in the show notes. There's a road that enters called Round Pond from the north, and there's a road that enters from the west called Reservation. And then inside the park itself, there is the two roads kind of join together and form sort of a loop that goes around the inside of the park. And it turned out the roads on the way in were just closed. And as I'm doing my investigation at the end of the day, I see that I drive to the northern lot and I see that that's roped off and chained off and you can't go in it. Not chained off, taped off is what I meant. And you can't get into the park any way other than that main road on the south. So what ultimately ends up happening is, exactly what I described before. Everyone is forced into the exact same area to start their day. And I go to the website at the end of the day And I see on their website that they say this is in response to COVID-19. This is not part of like, oh, it's earlier in the year, so we've shut it down. No, this is their idea for how to manage COVID-19, is to send everyone through one spot so that they can count the number of people in the park. And I guess, I don't know if their plan is to limit the number of people who can enter the park for the day, but they wanted to be able to have everyone go through the exact same route, which makes no sense. Because now you've got these 3 mountains again that I'm talking about that you can hike to. But if you're starting me out close to one, then that's the one I'm going to hike to. The other 2 that are further away are like a 4 or 5 mile hike to the middle mountain. And then it's, like an 8 mile round trip hike to get to, an 8 or 9 mile round trip hike to get to the furthest away mountain, the northern mountain, which is the one I wanted to hike to begin with. So just nobody's going to that one for the day. Maybe a couple really adventurous people are, but nobody's going to that one for the most part. Absolutely baffling stuff. As I was going through the website at the end of the day, though, and I'm looking around and paying more attention, I find that they've only put these restraints in place on Saturdays and Sundays. And I maybe should have known this because I was at the park a month earlier on a Friday and I was able to drive around just fine. But the issue then becomes, not only can I not park at the parking lot on the north or the parking lot on the east, and I have to park at the parking lot on the south, I can't even drive around the park to park at one of the trailheads. It's just, I get that. I don't think there's any ill intent by any of the people who are engaging in this, but it's so unbelievably baffling that they thought this was a good idea that I don't know how someone hasn't risen their hand and said, hey, what you're doing is extremely irresponsible, putting all these people together in one spot who just want to go hiking and just want to get outside because, being outside and going hiking in general are obviously healthy for you. But I think as more and more research is coming out about vitamin D, there seems to be more and more consensus that vitamin D is helping people with COVID. There is some issue where some people are saying the vitamin D, the specific receptors, those may align with the COVID receptors and make it easier for you to get. But it seems like the more you listen to the medical experts on whatever talk shows and podcasts that they get on, the more and more that sort of has started to get poo-pooed. And it seems to be that there's becoming a general consensus that vitamin D is specifically even good for COVID, obviously. But so if you limit the number of people in the parks, if that is their goal, is to limit the number of people in the parks, then you end up with more people at home. And I'll post at least one article that I'll put online here where, this is from, what is the website here? MedRx. It's an indoor transmission of SARS-CoV-2 by I can't even read their names. I'm sorry. I'm going to butcher this, but Hai Kai and T Mao, Li Lu Zhang. It's a Chinese article. I'm not going to continue to butcher people's names, but they conclude that, all of the identified outbreaks that they were able to get in the sample size that they found occurred in indoor environments. And so we come to the conclusion now that, maybe some research will show something else and who knows what the actual numbers are. But it seems to be from the research that's available to us that it is pretty, it's very hard to contract this disease from someone outside. And it seems to be very difficult based on the research available to us to get the disease if you're outside, which maybe that's encouraging going forward if we want to see our sports come back later in the year. I know I'm personally hoping to be able to watch the NASCAR race when they come to New Hampshire, but that's only, what is that? That's just a little over 2 months away at this point. So who knows if that's going to be, if I'm going to be able to see that or not. Regardless, it's not just, the state of New Hampshire that is engaged in the behavior of closing things down in such a way that it becomes more difficult for hikers and outdoorsmen to start from different areas and to, keep themselves further away from each other while hiking, right? Still in New Hampshire, the federal forest, what is it? The U.S. forest system, which is actually a segment of the USDA. I don't know if maybe I should have known that before, but I found that out while doing research for this. They have closed off, and they named specific on their websites. They name specific trailheads in the White Mountains that are closed temporarily because of COVID. And some of them are up in the White Mountains I'm talking about. And the thing is, it's very difficult to know what trailheads these all are, unless you know them all off the top of your head. And another thing that's a little unfortunate is it's not consistent from one part of the website to the other. So if you go at fs.usda.gov/White Mountain, at the top of the page, there's a little scroll down and you can see all the trailheads that they say are closed. But then if I go to the specific page within the USDA's website for the Crawford Connector Trail, it shows that the Crawford Connector Trailhead is closed, but that's not one of the ones listed on their website for COVID. Beyond, their ability to list websites, to list trailheads properly, and who knows how many trailheads they've actually missed. I don't know of anyone who has the time to dig through every trailhead to see what has been missed and what has not been missed and what's consistent on their website and what's inconsistent on their website. But specifically, I want to focus on this Crawford Connector Trailhead, and I'll try to post some type of map for people to see this. The Crawford Connector is a roughly half-mile trail that connects into the Crawford Path. So the Crawford Path is a pathway that extends. It starts in a section of the White Mountains called the Crawford Notch, and it goes up Mount Pierce. So Mount Pierce is one of the more popular mountains in the White Mountains to hike, and there's actually a trail that if you continue on the Crawford Path, that same trail, it takes you up. Let me look this up exactly. It takes you up then Mount Eisenhower, followed by Mount Franklin, and then to Mount Washington, which is of course the highest point in the Eastern Seaboard. It's a very popular mountain to get to the top of, obviously, and I think that's about 8 miles just one way out. But so everyone who wants to either hike Mount Washington from this point or just hike Mount Pierce goes up the Crawford Path. And the Crawford Connector, the closed trail, is just a trail that starts from a different parking lot and runs into the Crawford Path about a half mile up the mountain. So now everyone who wants to hike this extremely popular trail that goes to the top of Mount Pierce, Mount Eisenhower, Mount Franklin, and Mount Washington, all incredibly popular mountain sites. And I understand that there are other ways up Mount Washington. There are other ways up Mount Eisenhower. There's other ways up Mount Franklin. But this is really the only way that any people take up Mount Pierce. They all now have to start at the exact same parking lot, which is the Highland Center at the Appalachian Mountain Club. So again, we're running into this situation where a forest department has come in and passed some inane closing of a trail that doesn't make any sense. I can't tell you all the trails off the top of my head that they've listed there and which ones are most popular and which ones aren't. But I do know for a fact that closing the Crawford path, this one specifically that they did close, just ensures more traffic in a certain area. There aren't going to be people who say, oh, well, I can't hike Mount Pierce today, I'm going to hike somewhere else. No, they're just going to go down the road to a different parking area, or they're going to park on the side of the highway, because that's actually what people do in New Hampshire. They just park on the sides of the highways to do these trailheads. So if the trailhead's closed in one spot, they're just going to go to this other spot. And what makes these closings kind of more insane is how much more packed these parks actually are, because there's more and more people who are trying to get outside now, obviously because of the COVID thing. And I could tell you that myself going to, let's see, All Trails says I went to Bear Brook State Park on April 25th, and it was the most packed I've ever seen it. There's one kind of main road on the way in, and there's a parking lot off to the side when you first get there. I have never seen more than about 10 cars in that parking lot. When I went there on April 25th, one of the only a few weeks into the quarantine at the time, the whole parking lot was filled. And again, we run into the situation where, okay, I know I'm going to probably be safe outside, but it's a situation of, thank God Bear Brook isn't closing down parking lots all over their park. Thank God this state park is smart enough to not do that, while this other state park and while the U.S. Forest Service are choosing to do kind of dumb things. Now I've heard, so my point is, like, I know for a fact that there are more people out. I can see them with my own eyes when I go hiking, because I've never seen this many people out on these particular trails and on these particular paths before. But so I know that there's some argument that some of these trailheads are closed because the Forest Services don't want to go out and save people on certain trails, because they find that there's now some added danger to the people who are doing search and rescue during COVID. And I understand that entirely. That makes sense to me. I don't necessarily agree with closing trails, but that's a fair argument. But it doesn't explain a lot of the trails listed. And again, specifically the Crawford Path, the one that I named before, and then this Pawtuckaway Park, where Pawtuckaway Park is a small enough place and an easy enough to navigate and a thin enough forest that people can easily bushwhack in and out. People can easily travel in and out. It's not a big park. And then the Crawford Path itself, like I said before, only a half mile. You're not putting anyone in danger by having to save someone along that trail. These are decisions that don't really make any sense to me. So, but looking further at the state park's decision, we have a park called Franconia Notch, which is also up in the White Mountains. One of the most popular trails in the world, by the way, is called the Franconia Loop, which climbs up, I want to say it's Mount Lafayette. It's like 9 miles round trip. And it's such a popular trail that during the summer, when that trail is being used, there's actually a shuttle from other parking lots to that trailhead. It's not like, oh, it's a shuttle out and then you hike back somewhere. No, it's a loop. So in reality, if you wanted to close a trailhead and you wanted to, because you wanted to have fewer people in one spot, that would be the first one chosen. But I've gone to the state's website, and they do not have that one listed as any type of closure. In Franconia Notch, there's nothing that lists this, the most popular trail in the state of New Hampshire. It's so popular that prior to last year, when they started to really enforce it, people were parking on the shoulder of the interstate, not on the state highway. No, I-93. People park. I don't know. So So it boggles the mind how they're picking and choosing. Obviously, I would prefer just all the trails be closed. But if you're going to pick the ones to close, it's like, how is the Franconia Loop not the absolute first one chosen? It's on a lot of national lists as like one of the most pretty destinations for people to go in the world. And so people flock from all over to hike this trail. And it is without a doubt the most densely packed part of the White Mountains. And that is not what they chose to close. They chose to close other lesser visited areas in an attempt to, I don't know, send more people to the highly densely packed one. It doesn't make any sense. And then again, like I said, there's a shuttle from Cannon Mountain Ski Resort in the summer, because obviously they're not operating as a ski resort, from their parking lot down to the parking lot of the Franconia Loop. And I guess now, what, they're going to keep running that shuttle? They're going to keep putting people inside of the bus back and forth? It doesn't, they might not be doing that, but I don't know. I'm at a complete loss for understanding the way that the Forest Services work and the way that the Park Services work. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm honestly even at a loss that the Forest Service is part of the USDA, which I don't know how I didn't know that. Maybe I did know that at one point in time, but I found that out again while doing research for this episode. I'm at a loss for how that's a thing. Agriculture is not what the Forest Service is used for, so I don't know. This is me just being extremely disappointed in the way that all of this is shaped out. Thank you all for listening to me just complaining about the U.S. Forest Service and the state of New Hampshire's Forest Services. I know that there's equally asinine decisions being made all over the country with, I don't know, beaches being closed and what else is there? There's like skate parks being closed and stuff, despite the fact that it's seemingly nearly impossible to contract this disease outside unless you're touching someone or coughing on someone or things of that nature. You know, there's open ventilation. It's really easy to just stay 6 feet away from someone. If you're outside, that's really the healthiest place you can be right now. I don't know. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends on all the social medias, Facebooks, Twitters, whatever else. You can find Think Liberty on all of the social medias as well. You can find my own page for this particular podcast on Facebook if you just search for Tales from the Shire. And if you really enjoyed this podcast, go to Patreon, search up Think Liberty, toss us a couple bucks. Thank you all very much. I'll see y'all shortly for episode 18, whenever that comes out.